The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I am Reagan Kelly, and joining me for this very special episode, I got three co-hosts.
Laura Nash.
Nate Heininger.
And Shane Kelly.
And this week we're doing things a little differently. We needed a way to do an episode with low prep going into the holiday week, and we thought, what better way than to do a bit of a Q&A mailbag episode. So
Friendsgiving.
Yeah, we were probably going to have a Friendsgiving Skype call anyway. We figured we'd add a little structure and record it and make it relevant to you, the listener.
Yeah, you know, we all have such complicated and extensive plans this coming up holiday season, what with all the travel and indoor eating and partying that we're going to be doing. Like, we don't know when we're going to be able to get together.
I've got a really busy doorknob licking schedule that I can't pry myself away from.
Oh, God. Well, y'all, how's your pandemic going, guys?
Not a
Do you want an answer to that?
question, but we can
No.
No, let's not.
Well, listeners, we put out a call to our patrons on Patreon and also to our Twitter followers to submit some questions for the show, and we got a few pretty good ones here. Some about short games, some about games in general, and some other just sort of more general life questions. And we're going to go through not all of them. There are too many, but we figured we would try to randomize a little bit. So, Nate, do you have your D20?
I have a trusty D20 here that has helped me succeed and fail miserably across a couple different campaigns. Feel good about what it's bringing to the table here. We have a little bit over 20 questions, so we're going to be moving some things around as we take things off the list.
And we'll see how many of these we get through. Depends on time.
Yeah. There's no way.
Some of these are going to be quick hits.
Yeah. Please describe your D20.
Well, the one that I have chosen, mostly for its high contrast in my dark room, is it is a nice white. I guess it's almost like really I'd call it like a cookies and cream colored dice with black inset numbers.
Oh.
That sounds like a really boring die. I mean,
I'm sorry for...
a lot of us have fancy, glittery, like metal.
Don't dice shame, Shane.
I've got I could be rolling my rose quartz D20. We're gonna trust our fate here.
My polished steel D20 with the numeral 1 replaced with the word fuck.
Oh,
I did not come here for this. Okay,
No.
fancy.
Nate is doing us a service.
Thank you,
the
Nate.
white cookies and cream die bring us luck.
No more dice shaming.
I do have my fiery orange one for Scourge Hammer Kill, but I wanted to use this nice white one.
All right.
So, shall we commence with the questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Our first question, number 9. Any game or genre you would like to talk about, but never get the chance to? This came to us from our patron Hacksaw Unit.
I almost never on this show get to talk about my love of Magic the Gathering. I think,
Shut your mouth. I swear to God.
It's a tricky question, right? Because I think a lot of us, like, our gaming is determined by this show. I think we often have like maybe one other game that we're playing, maybe slowly but surely throughout playing playing games for this show. But doing a new game every week kind of makes it hard not to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that I kind of wish I could do just like an episode about crosswords, but it would be horribly boring for all three of you if you play it.
You never know.
And I'd be like, let's discuss who's got the great crosswords, or like which apps should you use your crosswords. You guys would be like, this is the most boring. Like, no one would care. I always puzzle games are super, like, word puzzle games are almost impossible to talk about.
Yeah.
So we never did an episode on threes. We talk about it, name dropping, but like there are to do a puzzle game, it has to be actually short, achievable, and have an exceptional hook like Baba's You.
Yeah. The more abstract it gets, the harder those are to actually do any kind of radio about. For me, it's JRPGs, or really, I guess, RPGs in general. They just don't mesh with this show. I don't play a ton of them, but I am like a little bit passionate about them. And I pretty much always have one sort of going in the background that I go back to when I have time between things for this show. And, never get a chance to talk about them on podcasts. I guess I do have things I could say about them, but you won't be hearing them.
They're also
right now.
long.
Yeah, very, very long.
Yeah. I definitely reference it from time to time, but I mean, have we done an episode about Dungeons and Dragons? In our 5-year run, we have done that. Okay. So
we did one centered around, it was early, but it was like, why you should play D&D or something like that.
I continue to run Dungeons and Dragons every couple of weeks, and I have done so for about as long as we've done this podcast. It's actually kind of on track about the same time. We started this podcast about 5 years ago, and about 5 years ago, I started running D&D, and with a few breaks, I have kept up with it pretty much. I took about a 7-month break for the pandemic until I figured out how to run it outdoors.
Nice.
And I'm kind of back on that BS now.
Yeah, that's something I had never. My first time playing Dungeons and Dragons was with you as our DM, and since then, now I have DM'd 2 campaigns, and I recently just started a Starfinder campaign. Now I'm not DMing; I'm participating. My character, Grammar Clock Chairduck, is a witch warper. It's a complicated story. I'm really excited for it. But yeah, I think we've talked about tabletop.
Yeah, I just did a quick search, and if listeners are really curious to hear Shane talk a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, go back and look for episode 118 from back in 2017.
God,
I would rather they check out the episode of The Enthusiast, where
yes, which we did talk about last week.
Yeah, shout out to Mark and his amazing show, The Enthusiast. If you want to hear me speak coherently about Dungeons and Dragons, I think that's the one to check out.
Yeah.
Well, there is a related question that is number 22, so I'm going to cheat and add it now, which is, what D&D class are you? And we were not sure if this was as real people. What class do you?
I think so. I think we've got to assign classes.
Oh no!
What class
it's
is
not
Laura
like who
Nash?
we play, right?
Right.
What class am I?
We've all had multiple classes in the game of D&D. So, but in canon reality, we each have one canonical class that we were born with. It's part of our genetic code.
Well, Reagan, you go first.
I would like to think I am a cleric a bard because of buffs.
I was definitely going to call you a bard.
Because of buffs. Like, my thing is just like, I am better at supporting other people's work than often coming up with my own stuff, but I get really excited about other people's work. So I think a bard is a good choice.
I think it's definitely going to be easiest if we assign these to other people. I'm definitely going to call Shane a barbarian.
Please explain.
I mean, he has this sort of gung ho energy to him, right? Like I've always thought of Shane as the he's my more extreme other half, right? He's wild and enthusiastic about things.
And he did have to buy a new car because he got really mad and split his other one in two. So there is that whole thing. So I think this makes sense.
Yeah. Also the bloodlust.
There's the bloodlust.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Reagan is the artificer class.
Oh yeah.
Which is a fairly recent addition to 5th edition D&D. The artificer is a tinkerer and a user of tools and repairer of things. And so I think I'll probably say that's the one to go with.
All right.
Yeah, and Nate,
I'm leaning necromancer, but I'm not sure.
I was going to go druid, but I might just be basing that off of your
facial hair.
I think ranger.
Yeah, ranger.
I think like if you were born in another time period, maybe it's just because you live in St. Louis and I've seen you do a lot of outdoor activities, but I feel like you would be very good in the past as opposed to much of us indoor kids. And that to me feels like a ranger.
I really appreciate this perspective on me, but I feel like this is so far from the truth.
What would you say?
Yeah, I would agree. Let's change questions. Says the not barbarian. Go on.
That's great, though. I appreciate it.
So, new role.
This is why I'm the dungeon master all the time, because I can't pick just one class. Let's roll again.
All right. This time I have rolled a 6. What's the longest game each of you have played, not counting MMOs or games as service?
Oh, that this rider at the end stops me from picking Destiny.
Does Fallen London count as games as service?
This question, by the way, comes from our beloved patron, the patron saint of Bird Week, which I believe is Robert Hawks, if I remember his name correctly.
I think you're right, but he became the patron saint of Bird Week. Mostly because his last name was Hawk.
Because his name was Hawk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Shout out to him. I saw this on the list, and it's one I've been thinking a lot about, because when you say not counting MMOs, that definitely cuts out what were easily my longest played games. I've talked on the show for a while about like an entire decade of my life was basically just MMOs. So the low hanging fruit answer for me here is probably, honestly, FTL. I honestly think that's probably the game I've played the most, but there's all these games from like teenage years too. Like I played more Age of Empires 2 than like I was like doing anything else for like 3 or 4 years of my life. So
if you're counting games as kids, like I wasn't allowed video games unless like, so I got like one a year and it was like The Sims. So like the amount of time I spent hacking The Sims, and if I had literally any other game, like probably more than I've ever spent as an adult.
I wouldn't necessarily have called myself a kid at this point, too. I think it was probably like...
Yeah, actually, it's very hard for me to estimate based on childhood games. If I'm going based on things I have actual like data or am able to properly estimate, I'd say it's probably The Witcher 3, which I spent definitely like a couple hundred hours with. I did everything in that game. Apart from the DLCs, I've still never done the DLCs for some reason. The maybe Escape Velocity, if we're including things that we played in childhood. I played a lot of Escape Velocity on the classic Macintosh back then, and probably adds up to hundreds of hours.
Yeah, I might. I mean, it's really hard because I don't have that many games that I've sunk just a truly enormous amount of time into, and the ones that I have are pretty distant in terms of time. So I would have a hard time guessing at the amount of time that my top 2 I've invested in, because the number 1 probably is Skyrim, The Elder Scrolls, which, I mean, it goes without saying that's a big game, and it's a game that you can just mess around in for a really, really long time. But right. I'm not totally sure if it dethroned like The Sims 2, which I spent an awful lot of time mucking around in.
Once you got that like Rosebud cheat code,
right away.
Mods from the internet, it just became like
right away.
Photoshopped the game at some point.
See, I always felt like once you got to the point where you were using the unlimited money code in whatever game you play, you are on the last legs of that game. Like,
not in The Sims.
Well, because I played The Sims too, but once I started using that cheat code, I stopped playing like not that long after, because I was like, I guess I was like really compelled by the drive of the game, and then just like being able to buy everything and kit out everything. I had the same problem with I got really into just about every version of the Tycoon games, Roller Coaster, Zoo, whatever, all out there. As soon as I put in that all money cheat code, I was probably like done playing it within a week or so.
I think I knew I had a Sims problem when I realized that like I could only just have one house and one family I cared about, and everybody else was just a wall with a phone on it and 10 people for my people to hook up with. And then it was like, oh, maybe I should stop playing this game. Like,
yeah,
maybe.
I might have to just like throw No Man's Sky in there, because I've sunk just a really ridiculous amount of time into that. When we get into this level of dedication to non, all of this is dwarfed by the amount of time I wound up spending in Destiny.
Yeah, if you're counting MMOs, it's World of Warcraft, EverQuest, and then Destiny for me. But like, I think the only other one I can think of, I don't know if you all got into these games as much, but Fallout 3 New Vegas, I spent an incredible amount of time playing.
Yeah, I never played that one. I only ever played the original Fallout 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also was really into the Grand Theft Auto games, so I probably spent a fair amount of time just, playing those.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about
causing
that.
mayhem.
Yeah. A lot of those.
This is why I really wish there was some way to get accurate stats. We spend a lot of time thinking about like how much time a game actually takes to finish, and so we've run into again and again and again issues with how bad all the different systems for like tracking time spent in a game are. Like every console has this feature and they're all implemented equally badly. Like,
Yeah.
if you pause, if you suspend, like if you forget to turn the console off or whatever it is, like it's always tracked and it's always wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My if we are going by Steam, it's just Stardew Valley. What's the next one?
Roll it up. Roll the dice.
All right.
Roll it up.
Next question.
Roll
Here we
the
go.
dice.
14. What other podcasts do you listen to? So let's just go in order
It's
here.
from listener Colin. Thank you, Colin.
From Colin.
Thank you, Colin.
About 15 million. Hit me up if you want a recommendation. That's the short answer.
Because I listen to a lot of podcasts. What are your what are the ones that you were listening to, like, the day it comes out and you're going to listen to it probably within like a handful of hours since it's been released versus, I think I have a ton of podcasts that I listen to that it's like only once I've expelled like all my primary shows do I like really dig into these. So Laura, what would you say if you can, like, what is maybe the one or two that you are like, when it's coming out and what you're gonna you're gonna listen to every episode every week?
Yeah. So currently I'm really into You're Wrong About. But I think like my long-term go-tos, there's one called She Done It, which is about Golden Age detective fiction. There is one called Radio Westeros, which is extremely well-produced Game of Thrones podcast where they actually summarize basically everything about a character arc. They do readings and everything. Like, they're just so much better than everybody else. It's almost like dumb.
Nice.
But I think like from a more accessible one, I think the one I end up recommending to almost everyone is Decoder Ring, where they take one topic.
I was going to
they
recommend that too.
explore it. Yeah. So I listen to a lot of, kind of talky. I don't like the long-term loosey-goosey improv ones. I like a little bit of produced topic stuff, but I think like niche podcasts about special interest topics are almost always my favorites.
Nice.
So for me, I've gone through a lot of periods where I listen to a very large number of podcasts, and I'm the kind of person that like tends to pick and choose episodes. So almost no podcast do I like listen to every single episode. I look at episode descriptions and I kind of filter things into a queue. And there was a point before I did a big cull recently where I was subscribed to 80 something podcasts. So that's how I go about podcasts. But the few podcasts that I know I listen to pretty much every episode for, probably my number one is Waypoint Radio. I'm a big fan of the work they do over there. Waypoint is Vice's sort of video game website that previously was its own thing and Vice has mismanaged it and it's a shadow. The website is a bit of a shadow of its old self, but the podcast is still going strong, and it's got like Austin Walker and Rob Zachney and Patrick Klepek and Gita Jackson joined recently, and it's probably my favorite sort of video game chat show. And they are also weekly, which is really nice. They have really lengthy, meaty episodes once a week. So it's a lot to listen to, but it's probably my favorite. I also am a big fan of the Accidental Tech podcast. I'm interested in tech generally and Apple stuff specifically, and I like that show a lot. And, there's a lot of other shows that I tend to, I'll recommend Enthusiast from friend of the show, Mark Bramhill. I'm a big fan of that.
Twice in this episode now.
Yes, yeah. Lately for news, I've been listening to Consider This from NPR, which is a decent news podcast that doesn't make me hate my life. I I don't know what else to recommend at the moment. I have a lot of podcasts subscribed. I kind of jump around a lot.
Well, one that hasn't been mentioned here, although you guys have covered a lot of things I do love, is The Memory Palace by Nate DeMeo, which is a little historical vignette told in a kind of a poetic sort of way, and it's very well produced, and you can pretty much jump in anywhere. All of them are pretty good, and yeah, I totally recommend that one all the time.
Yeah, I think actually that's the one podcast in my list of current subscriptions that I've been subscribed to longest. Like for
it's been going a
decade or more.
Yeah, it's absolutely excellent. Previously on the show, I have recommended in a Making Me Happy, the Magnus Archives, which is coming to its conclusion. It's a horror fiction podcast that I've been really enjoying. And let me see if there's anything else I can think of. I have some weird picks. I tend to listen to podcasts to fall asleep. And so I have the old reliable, a podcast called Sleep With Me, by a dude named Scooter, who will tell you a boring bedtime story and will bore you so much that you are almost certainly guaranteed to fall asleep.
It's a weird skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my fave one that I'm listening to pretty much as they come out, and still also working my way through the back catalog, is Blank Check with Griffin and David. This is a movie review podcast. It's a movie podcast about filmographies. They pick a director and they do an episode on every single movie in that director's canon. And so, for example, right now they're working their way through Robert Zemeckis. So one of the great things about the podcast is they have now come to the point where they're, I would say, quite popular, very popular, and have really great guests on almost every episode. So the last episode they did Castaway, and they had Nia DaCosta, who's the upcoming director of the new Candyman adaptation. So
neat.
So I'm a big fan of that show, and I tend to kind of watch along with them. So it's a really nice show for that. They're really great at finding the kind of putting the movie, not just critiquing it, but putting it into context in terms of, like, you know, how it got made and the director's filmography. A couple of really smart.
That reminded me of one that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, I was going to say I want to name check a couple more, but I won't.
I'll make it very quick. I like 30-20-10 for pop culture stuff. 30-20-10 is a podcast where they talk about this week in 30 years ago, 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, like what movies were coming out, what was on TV, and so on. And it's great for just sort of reminding me and making me feel old. Like, that was 20 years ago every week. And it's been great to kind of like get it, watch movies and stuff along with that. So that's another one to recommend.
Yeah, I will let Nate go, but first, I want to recommend 3 real quick ones, because I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't look at the cheat list. So I have like 20 ones I listen to weekly, which is a little scary, but I'll say Appointment Television is an excellent TV podcast that also recognizes that old movies or old TV shows are good. They do TV book clubs of shows that have already been out. Cocaine and Rhinestones, A History of Country Music, is extraordinarily good, especially if you don't know anything about country music of the 70s. And the last one I will say is Something True, is a history podcast that doesn't feel like almost reads like a fiction podcast. It's so nicely produced.
Neat.
Nice.
All right, roll them bones, Nate.
Yeah, no, I'm going to answer this podcast
Nate
question.
hasn't answered the question.
I'm sorry,
we
Nate.
all talk too much.
Yeah.
I thought Laura was throwing to you. Never mind. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue, Nate.
I honestly forgot Nate hadn't gone yet. So
yeah,
It's
I had
okay.
to. Sorry, Nate. Go ahead. What do you listen to?
Yeah, no worries. So I listen to a lot, as I said at the top, but some of my favorites, Last Podcast on the Left. It's a murder horror comedy show. It's been really interesting to watch these guys go from basically like literally a basement to now they're the flagship podcast of Spotify's attempt at a podcast empire. So they're great, and it's a wonderful show. I'm a big fan of a podcast called The Doughboys, which is it's a show about reviewing fast food. But it's 2 improv comedy. If you're into the whole alt improv comedy scene, Comedy Bang Bang, How Did This Get Made? that whole world of comedy. It's that same world, but they review fast food chains, and it's fantastic. You got to listen to the show to really understand it. There's a relationship that goes on in this show that is really hard to explain, and you just got to listen to it. It's very, very funny. And all those other, like, How Did This Get Made and Comedy Bang Bang are two of my favorites. For politics, I listen to Pod Save America pretty much every single week, and I'm also a big fan of a show called The Dollop. And then finally, Dungeons and Daddies, maybe my favorite podcast right now. If you're not listening to it, I recommend that you do. It is
Dungeons and Dragons Dream Daddy mashup, right?
It actually, like, on premise, it sounds almost like internet-y exploitive, but then when you listen to it, it's actually fantastic. But what it really is, it's four dads who have become lost in the Forgotten Realms, and they're on a quest to rescue their sons. And it's fantastic. It's really, really funny. I really, really enjoy it. If you like Adventure Zone, kind of when Adventure Zone first started, before they, and I still listen to that show, but before they got like really into like, how do we make everything like have an emotional heart, and more it was like, what if we just make jokes while playing D&D? That's what Dungeons and Daddy still does really, really well. So
awesome.
Really, really love that show. So, all right, let's go on to another question. I have somehow managed to misplace. Here it is. 12. So for number 12, we have, what is your favorite game console? This comes to us from David Giza.
I think this one can be pretty quick for most of us, probably. For me, it is probably the Game Boy Advance. I have many other loves in my heart, but the Game Boy Advance is wonderful. I own a bunch of Game Boy Advances. I have a pretty large collection of GBA games, and I love it.
Switch.
You know, Laura, that's what I've been sitting here thinking. I'm like, oh, is it my PS4, which I've had for so long now and has been my trusty companion? Is it something throwback like Nintendo 64? Or is it Switch? I'm having a hard time not just saying Switch. It has been what I have spent the significant majority of my game playing over the last, since the Switch came out, has been all Switch. And it's great. And I love it. So Switch. 3 Switches and a Nintendo DS. We are
Game Boy Advance,
big,
please.
Whatever. We are.
Whatever, Reagan. Get on the
Nintendo
Switch train,
wants to sponsor
Reagan.
us. We are definitely open.
Honestly,
for
Reagan, I was sitting here ready for like some deep cut on like a Famicom that was only released in like the southern tip of Korea for 3 days or something. So your answer was way more mainstream than I expected.
Thanks, Nate.
All right, moving on.
Roll them.
11. We're all right. In the same spot.
What game are you most thankful for this year? From listener and supporter Hacksaw Unit. Most thankful for. That's a tricky one.
I can say.
Go for it.
Yeah. So for me, the game that came out at the right time for me, I think also came out at the right time for a lot of people, and it's Animal Crossing New Horizons. Right. I mean, there's really, it really shows that for me and for lots and lots and lots of people, like, there was a pent up demand for a new Animal Crossing game, for a new console. But that isn't why it was like the biggest seller of the entire year. That's because people wanted something comforting and quiet and somewhat social and kind and nice. In a time that was super confusing and upsetting and scary. So, it was the right game at the right time. And it was,
I think that's a really good answer. For me, I did play that and liked it. But my answer is going to be a little idiosyncratic. I got a lot of sort of quiet joy out of returning to Persona 3 this year. So that's my answer.
And I think it's the Jackbox games, because I started doing family game nights and I didn't expect my brother to be like, cool, what's the next game? I thought we were going to play one game for the night. And he was like, what's cool. We played this for a little bit. What's next? And I was like, and because it was a party pack, I was actually okay.
That's a good answer. I've played some of those over Zoom and whatnot with people this pandemic, and it's definitely a good one to be thankful for in these weird times.
Yeah,
really saved my butt.
That's interesting. I was gonna go similar to Reagan and say I we just had the birth of our second daughter that spent a lot of late nights just sitting on the couch playing Switch, and I played through almost 100%ing Hollow Knight. So I was gonna say Hollow Knight, but honestly, I've talked about this on a previous episode a while ago. But through this entire pandemic, I've had a weekly poker game with a group of my friends utilizing this garbage but successfully adapted poker app called Poker with 3 R's 2.
Right.
And it's like got this really wacky like skin that's like, you're a secret agent. Like, can you it's all going to be on the table tonight. Can you take down the bad guy and win the hearts of the femme fatale? It's like, it's really terrible and trashy. But it has facilitated a weekly game that has allowed me to stay connected and actually get further connected with some people that I had lost connection with over the years. And there are a handful of people now that through this pandemic, I am much better friends with than I was before the pandemic. And that's a weird thing a weird outcome of this whole thing. But I'm thankful to these games that just work and allow you to just have like a reason to sit on a Zoom call with like 6 or 7 of your friends. Because we all know, just if anyone's been invited to like a poorly planned
Zoom hangout,
Zoom hangout, it's awful.
Something
you need
to do.
something. Yep. And so I've been playing this poker game, and I also did recently get into Among Us, which obviously is like the thing right now, so I don't really need to explain it, but it's been a blast. So these games that have like allowed people to come together is the thing that I am thankful for this year.
Awesome.
I was the imposter 6 times in a row at the end of the one game of Among Us we played.
Oh my God. Well,
to the point that I killed myself and said, I as an imposter for our last game. And I was like, I don't want to be the imposter for the last game. And everyone's like, okay, cool. But if you're the imposter, don't say anything. And of course, I was the imposter again.
So there's rumors. I can't tell if it's just people over like misunderstanding random number generators, but there is a rumor that there's like a glitch that one person can be at like more times than they're supposed to, so you can leave the game, start a new game, and it should fix it. But I had the inverse the other night. I played for 2.5 hours. I was the imposter one time, and I was like, all right, this is less fun. You got to be the imposter sometimes.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next question. 3. Is there a game that first made you think shorter games deserve as much attention as big budget, stuffed to the gills with content AAA ones? This one also coming from David Giza. I think, Reagan, you can really answer this one for all of us, because this very question is kind of what started this podcast.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, for me, it was pretty much specifically Gone Home was the game that made me start this show or want to start this show. If you haven't listened to it, we've covered Gone Home twice. Our first episode, and then I think it was our 200th episode. We returned to it and did it again because our first episode was kind of bad because it was our first episode. But Gone Home. That's the answer. It's I think it's the game that like it introduced a new way of doing storytelling in video games, or at least brought a lot of new ideas to a way that had been experimented with previously. And I mean, it's still one of my very favorite
Listen to the 2 episodes about it.
Yeah, go listen to that. It's great.
Yeah. All right. I really think that answers for all 4 of us. So let's go on to another question.
Roll them bones.
All right. We have our first double. So that's going to lead us to pulling one of our excess questions, which, first of all, is a really important question. This comes to us from The Sweat from our Patreon. Reagan, what gives you the right?
I own the domain name.
Deal. All right, moving on to our next question. Let me roll
and
again.
Yet you didn't get the Twitter handle. Underscore the short game.
Don't rub it in. I never get the Twitter handle I want. Never.
I know. We never do. There's a Nate in Australia just having a good old time with @Nate.
I've told you guys about the person who got. So I'm at Reagan K, and at Reagan with my fairly unique spelling is got into Twitter about a year before I did, and her Twitter bio just says mom and designer, and she tweeted one time on her first day on Twitter, and that tweet, which is still her only tweet, just says reading email.
She got a lot of email to get through, man. She'll let us know when she's done.
There was a news story a while back saying that like they were going to start freeing up old unused Twitter handles, and I was like so excited that they were going to do that. I was like, I'm going to get Reagan. I will be first in line. And they haven't done it. They said they were going to do that like 2 or 3 years ago, and they've still never done it.
Too busy with fleets.
Yeah.
And that officially dates this podcast to November 2020.
Yep. It's like timeline goes sideways. Hearts are now florps.
All right. Next question. Number 18. This is an interesting question. In a time where most of us are trapped at home, what are some physical spaces, places, or buildings you've been thankful for over the years? This comes to us from Spinda, also from the Patreon.
I've got an answer to that. That's really been helping me out during this time. And that is, I have been really fortunate to be down the block from a place called Coral Sword. And I know you guys have heard me talk about the place before. I'm literally just a few blocks away from it. It's a game store / coffee shop. And the reason it's been helping these days, even though, we're avoiding eating indoors and things like that, is, I'd really gotten to know Sandy, the guy that kind of is the managing partner there. And I helped build a deck out front of the place, basically turned all the parking in front of Coral into a deck with outdoor tables. And that has enabled like masked, socially distanced gaming for me. And that is what's responsible for like after a 7-month hiatus, me being able to start playing Dungeons and Dragons again. So that's been a really wonderful place. And I think your local games shop, your local coffee shop needs whatever support you can give them in this time, because it is a absolute nightmare for local retail, especially the kind of small local retail that is responsible for, it's where you're going to, when this is all over, where you're going to want to be buying your games and your coffees and whatever it is that you want to buy. So I hope everyone out there is thinking about their local shops and things like that.
I don't think I would have been as sane as I have been through the pandemic if it wasn't for the courtyard in our apartment, which is one of the only places I can be far away from people, not buying things, and outside. I really think that like New Yorkers made a deal with the devil to like, we have very bad apartments, so we can go to wonderful public spaces, and almost all of those are closed. So like the fact that I have a courtyard right now is keeping me going. But I'll say in the past, as for coffee shops, like in Chicago, Wormhole Coffee is an exceptionally good nerdy coffee shop.
Love that
and
place.
It's next door to Myopic Books, a used bookstore, which keeps you busy browsing. So like I spent so much time waiting for tables at brunch spots up and down the street. Just you can wait for an hour and a half because you can get a great coffee from Wormhole, and then you can go look at used books, and eventually your buzzer will ring. And that's just been fantastic.
We did exactly that thing when we came in, when me and some friends went to Chicago for a show 2 years ago and hung out with you and Justin for the whole weekend. Mm-hmm. Went to Wormhole, got coffee, went around Myopic while waiting for our table at a fantastic brunch spot. So it was wonderful.
Never gets old.
Yeah, it was fantastic. For me, I live in St. Louis, and St. Louis has some really wonderful parks that are available and completely open with a lot of free features within them. And so this last 9 months or so, really spent a lot of time in these really gorgeous outdoor areas. Forest Park is massive and has a beautiful lake that's all walking distance from our house. And The St. Louis Zoo is there. There's just a lot of the art museum. Well, we're not going in there right now, but there's a lot of wonderful things in Forest Park that are free and beautiful. So I'd say that the parks in our area have really been a great place for us.
I don't have a lot of that around me. I do have a one small park near me that I could say I'm pretty thankful for. That's a really nice park, but specifically the one thing about it that I think is cute is that it has a little putt-putt course in it.
Nice.
And so I've been experimenting with that a little bit during the pandemic. But I guess if I had to say what I've been thankful for more recently, probably, so we moved into a new house this year, just before the pandemic, which has been tough because it's, in a new place and suddenly locked down in a house, but at least I'm in a nice new house that we are liking. And so for me, I guess if I had to be specific, probably the thing I'm most thankful for right now is the back porch. We have a screened-in back porch. Being screened in is very important in Houston because there are plague flies. This is just absolute swarms of mosquitoes here. And having a screened-in back porch is something I've never had before. I still haven't done everything with it that I would like, but I've during certain parts of the year, I was taking my morning coffee out there and sitting and watching the sun come up after I dropped the kids off for daycare, but before starting work. And so probably that space. That's been nice. Well, let's roll them bones.
All right, here we go. I have rolled a 4. All right. This one is intricate. What is the shortest game that's still a video game? Assuming that video game mechanics imply repetition. Therefore, it can't be a one-decision twine game, for example. This comes to us from Philip Hrasic via Twitter. This is kind of like, what is art?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, but I actually I have one game that immediately sprang to mind for me on this one, so sure. I'm going to recommend that everyone play Queers in Love at the End of the World. Now he specifically said it can't be a one decision twine game, and this is I'm considering not that because it has multiple decisions, but it's also very, very, very short. I don't remember exactly how short off the top of my head. I think it's under a minute. Oh, it's 10 seconds. So it's a game that you're playing out a conversation between two lovers right as the world is ending, and you have 10 seconds to say what you want to say. And it has multiple branching paths. There's actually quite a lot of sort of narrative space in it for something that is intended to be played multiple times, obviously, to try to get the words right. And I've always loved it. It's really, really great. And you can find it on Anna Anthropy's itch.io page.
Nice.
There's a game I'd like to suggest to everyone. I think that maybe sits right at the lower boundary of game length, and it's also been incredibly just useful to me on a personal level at many times from my childhood to my adulthood. The short game would be single elimination rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
Hold on. That is trash. So single elimination. At that point, you're just a game of luck. You got to go 2 or 3.
It's a game of psychology.
Not out of single elimination. That you get no information. It's just guesswork. 2 out of 3
Maybe
is where it's at.
Stop. You're making a fool of yourself.
No.
Listen,
Please.
The depth, the replayability.
Speaking like someone who throws paper first.
Shane, I think you have the right answer here.
See, I want to see you sweat after the first one. I understand that there may be some strategy to a single elimination, but 2 out of 3 is where the mind games begin. All right. I love the time in between throw number 1 and throw number 2. And if it makes it to a decisive 3, there's no more stressful thing than you'll feel in your entire life than that moment. What are they going to throw? Rock, paper, scissors. We'll never know.
Yeah, I'm writing down future episode idea. Rock, paper, scissors.
I don't think we can answer this question without mentioning a game that we mention all the time on this show, because I think it holds the ratio of longest podcast episode to length of game, which is, and I had to Google it, Dr. Langeskov, the Tiger, and the Terribly Cursed Emerald, a Whirlwind Heist. It's a game that we covered on the show. I think it takes about 10 to 15 minutes. and it sparked about an hour and a half conversation. I know there are shorter games for sure, but this is a game with full on like 3D world, full on creation, voice acting, everything. So when I think of like, what most people would think of a video game, this is the shortest one that I can think of, at least that we've covered.
It's like, yeah,
definitely. Rock, paper, scissors really beats it for replayability, though.
Agree 100%. I also, if we're talking about that, I'll also say that game where you just get a whole bunch of dots and everyone can, on your turn, you can only draw one line,
classic.
And then your goal is to make squares. That's another good one. All right, next question. Here we go. Rolled a double, so we'll go to our overflow here. I forgot we put this on here. What's everyone's most weeby game they like other than Reagan?
This was contributed by my wife,
which implies that Reagan is a weeby game.
This came from Jamie, Reagan's wife. I'll tell you that my favorite weeby game is watching Reagan try to toe the line between losing his mind on our episodes and keeping it cool when he's talking about his weeby games. That's my favorite weeby game, is the internal struggle Reagan deals with when it's just, if we were a video podcast, if you could watch it, just Reagan's like turmoil he's going through while trying to not just lose his mind for an hour about whatever thing it is and keep it tight on the episode. That's my favorite.
The thing that blows me away is that virtually every time that Reagan is being mocked for being a weeb on this show, it's a brutal self-own. It's almost never one of us.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's part of my favorite game, is watching this like internal struggle that he deals with. His question was born from his own, his own feelings. So
I'd like to share mine, which we've actually covered on the show, which was basically the Puyo Puyo series. The most wonderfully weeby thing about these is that, I love it for the puzzle elements. I tolerate it for the incredibly over elaborate and over indulgent storylines that divide the puzzles into little chunks. There are a million characters in the Puyo Puyo series, and they're all horrible.
Yeah, I'll say that I played a ton of a visual novel called Bar Oasis 2, which is a mixology Korean version of a JRPG. And then, but the reviews are basically like, it gets old mixing cocktails because you want to know the drama between all of these anime characters in the bar so bad. But that game is lost to the sands of time, and
thanks.
Not
iOS.
even the company I work for can bring it back.
What a bummer. All right, roll them bones.
Let's do it. Next question. 8. All right. What's a game you keep coming back to, Colin?
A game that I keep returning to over and over and over again, and I don't know when I will ever stop, is the Alto's Odyssey and Alto's Adventure. Those are just my zone out phone game, and that's a niche that's really hard to dethrone.
Honestly, that is my answer too. I have 100%ed one of those games and the other one very nearly, although I don't know. But yeah, I've gone back and replayed those just endlessly. They're still on my phone.
Mm-hmm. I would play it a ton more if they didn't, if they let you play podcasts in the background. I would probably be playing it nonstop.
They do now, at least. I know I'm able to do that. So,
ooh, good.
Just tossing that out there.
I am very upset that now Threes tells you how many games you've played, because it makes me terrified for my life. Knowing how many times I've played Threes is like, it's like a forbidden knowledge.
Are you going to own up? Are you going to tell us?
I'm trying to open it, actually. So if I can get it to...
Nate, do you have an answer?
Yes. My answer is predictably FTL and Into the Breach. Those are just perfect replayable strategy games. I just enjoy them so much. So,
oh, and if we're just talking about this year, Sonic Mania.
Oh, great!
I
game.
went back to and replayed the whole thing in the new mode, and then kept it going. I back to back that game after coming back to it this year. So
nice.
It doesn't hurt that my son really, really likes Sonic the Hedgehog, but man, that game really flows.
All right, let's roll it up.
I'm ready to roll again.
All right, next one we've got 16. What are your most ardent non-gaming hobbies or interests? This comes to us from Gaming in the Wild.
That's so. I probably the easiest answer for me there, because I have a lot of. I feel almost called out by this question because that made me realize how many of my hobbies and interests are at least in some way gaming related. Like I can't say
I had the same
I like
problem.
electronics.
Oh, yeah?
I like to repair them or something like that because it's I'm mostly repairing game stuff. So I guess the most non-game related hobby, and I was also going to say podcasting. It's no, that doesn't quite count either. Probably tiki cocktails, both going to tiki bars, which I love to do when there's not a pandemic on, and making tiki cocktails at home, collecting tiki,
which you're really good at.
Delicious.
All of the tiki things, even just reading about tiki stuff. It's one of the things I like, and
So if you're like me, and you may have at one point in your life walked by a tiki bar and thought, "Who likes that?"
You did? Oh no!
It's Reagan. It's endearing. No, I don't. I'm not. I've been the benefactor of a wonderful tiki environment and cocktail from Reagan. So
I got a couple of oddball hobbies that, well, I guess they're not that oddball. I have gotten really into houseplants.
I love it. I love this for you.
weirdo.
I know. Like many people these days, I have started gathering various houseplants and learning their care and feeding, and now my house is full of them, and so that's good for me. And then I guess the other is just movies. Movies have always been a big hobby for me. And it's not just I like to watch movies. I like to learn about how movies are made and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I have. I'm a collector of hobbies. My friend Sarah made us all take Enneagram tests, and I got a 7, which is a person who doesn't ever specialize in something and just does everything. And I was like, oh, cool. I've now found my self-identified thing. But some hobbies that I've been into, I love reading. Even in the pandemic, with Pandemic Brain, I think I'm still at 53 books so far this year,
nice.
which I feel pretty good about. I am a really big, I love reading about history, but I the nonfiction books about one topic kind of bore me. So I like a lot of grab bag stuff. I think I've quilted a map of Chicago by hand for the last couple of years, and I keep embroidering it because it's never going to be done. And I've probably spent, you want to talk longest hours, I've probably spent about 200 hours on that thing. Turns out you hand quilt a thing, every stitch is by you. It's a lot of TV. I watch so much TV. That's another hobby, I guess.
Just again, I wish we were filming this because just the little moment of realization in your eyes as you mentioned TV, and you're like, oh yeah, TV.
I watch so much TV.
Yeah,
I mean, I also love collecting. If I had a ton of money, I would collect animation concept art, but I'm broke, so I look at the internet at animation concept art.
Nice.
And I the couple books I do own, I treasure.
That's awesome. So for me, I think I relate heavily to you, Laura, on this. You got a lot of things that I'm interested in, but none that I are
it's
primary.
What day is it? What is my current hobby? Yeah.
But I'd say so I'm a big fan of baseball. I'm not really a sports guy, but other than baseball, of which I'm a huge fan of, I also have gotten really into cooking. I really like a lot of different things, but I got a sous vide, an immersion circulator a few years ago, so really love playing around with that. I also have gotten over the past year or so really into making home pizza, like entirely from scratch, flour from Italy, all of that. I also music and just music making and listening to music, similar to like what Shane would say about movies, but for me it's music. Like I just listen. That's my Spotify subscription is like my best friend, and I am always looking for what's new and what's out. And I also have play music, so I've got a bunch of just random little keyboards and drums and guitar and pretty much anything that I can get my hands on. I want to play it. So a lot of different stuff. I do think though, like Reagan, it's like I have to like gaming and everything around gaming is kind of like what is primary. And then it's when I'm not doing that, it's all this other stuff. So
I think all of us are theater geeks though.
Well, yeah, that's a good point.
Like I didn't mention it because I assumed someone else was going
I'm kind of afraid to say that I'm actually an ex-theater geek. Like I'm so out of touch with everything theater related these days. Like I get most of my like theater like updates from like mostly from you, Laura. Like
yeah, I was gonna say for me.
My theater geekness still lives in me through the fact that the Hamilton soundtrack is my number one listened to album for like 4 years in a row on Spotify. So but yeah, I haven't been directly involved in theater in like 10 years. But that was a huge part of my life for a long time.
Yeah.
I had a theater company I co-founded in Chicago. I've, left it, obviously, because I don't live there. But it's now I just am I like being a patron. I like being a patron for the cheap lottery tickets when there's not a pandemic.
Yeah.
You definitely make yourself feel a lot better when you call yourself a patron of the art when you're waiting to see if your like free lottery for a ticket from the local university comes through or not.
Hey, I won Cursed Child tickets. So
I'm talking about myself.
Oh yeah. Roll them bones.
All right. So our next one, I think we're going to do two more. So this second to last one, this penultimate question. Number 7, what's the rarest game each of you own? From Patron Saint of Bird Week. Rarest game.
I have so if it's not game hardware, because I have a Vectrex, and those are I guess a little bit rare these days. And I suppose some of the games I own for the Vectrex might be considered rare. So I have some like, and I'm not really sure if we would be counting things like a homebrew game for the Vectrex that probably has like a run of a few hundred copies. Those are very rare in terms of numbers, but I'm not sure that's quite what people think of when they think of a rare game. I think weirdly enough, the rarest commercially released normal game type game that I own, because I actually don't own a lot of like rare retro stuff in terms of actual games. Probably the rarest normally released game I own is actually the PS4 release of Gravity Rush Remastered for the PlayStation 4. That was a Vita game that got a remaster on PlayStation 4, and for whatever reason they and I didn't know this when I bought it, but they only released it via Amazon and pretty much only for pre-orders. So if you didn't pre-order it on Amazon, then there was nowhere else to get it. And I see it going up. It was like a $40 game when I bought it, like a budget price release. And I think it's like a couple $100 or sells occasionally for a couple $100 now, but it's not even really so much the price. It's just a pretty rare game. And I also am kind of excluding, like, I own some things from limited run games that I think might have a lower print run than that, but it's hard to say. Anyway, that's what I guess is probably my rarest thing, even though it's maybe not the most exciting thing.
I own quite a few rare Magic cards that I will not bore you with.
So I am not a collector of really anything, but my PS4 still has PT installed on it, which, as I understand, is becoming an increasingly rare and collectible thing. So that is my rare game. All right, and our last question of the day, and we're hand selecting this one to end it. It's just an important question that the people need to know. favorite Thanksgiving dish, coming to us from David Giza. What's everyone's favorite Thanksgiving dish?
Sweet potatoes with marshmallows on top. And this is always a big thing. Like the marshmallow to sweet potato ratio in my household has gotten increasingly ridiculous over the years. Like it's mostly marshmallows at this point, like the density of putting an entire package on top. But it's funny because I usually have Thanksgiving now with my in-laws, and they make healthy sweet potatoes, and I don't want to ruin it. So actually what I contribute yearly is cornbread stuffing.
Nice.
That's the one thing I make every year because I don't want to bring my like horrible Southern, mostly orange juice and sugar sweet potatoes to the beach.
It's funny you talk about ratio, though, because one of my favorite Thanksgiving dishes is pumpkin pie, and I believe firmly that you need a 2-to-1 whipped cream to pumpkin pie ratio on your pumpkin pie for it to really be perfect. So I'd say pumpkin pie and whatever cheesy potato thing is going to be there. There's 100 different versions of it, and every time it's like what I ultimately end up just wanting the most of, some sort of cheesy potato thing. Just give me all of it.
I'm always about the pie. I just got to have my pie, whatever kind of pie it is. I could usually go with like an apple over like pumpkin pie, the seasonal pies of this time of year.
What about pecan?
Yeah, I gotta love that pecan.
Oh yeah,
especially if it's hot with a side of ice cream.
So depressing. The grocery store today had every type of pie except they had blueberry pie. They did not have pecan.
No.
And I was like, Yankees.
Pecan pie is probably mine. Although since Shane already said pecan pie and Laura already said the sweet potatoes with the marshmallows on top, those are definitely probably my top two. But a near third would be hot rolls with butter. Usually there's some freshly baked bread rolls.
Ooh. Do you like the Hawaiian sweet rolls, or are you more like a more classic wheat or even white roll?
Honestly, I like a white roll. I like
cornbread, please.
Yeah, cornbread, excellent choice. And I like the Hawaiian rolls too. Those are fine. If you prefer something that's like pre-baked, but I like straight from the oven, freshly baked white bread rolls with butter. That's what I like.
Hard to beat. Because the Hawaiian roll isn't as good with butter as you'd like it to be. Like white rolls, when you add butter, is like an exponential increase in goodness, and Hawaiian rolls, when you add butter, is just like a linear increase.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, and you got to get a nice salted butter. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so good.
And Hawaiian rolls don't taste good dipped in gravy.
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I don't know.
I have no problem dipping those in gravy.
Yeah. Do you really want to commit to that, Laura?
I do not. I rescind my hasty decision.
All right. Well, this was a good time, and I hope all of our listeners out there are having a safe Thanksgiving.
And I'd also like to call out that we also know that we have listeners outside of America.
Yes.
So so we just hope you are having a nice meal right now. Mm-hmm. I hope that whoever you are, wherever you are, you have a wonderful meal sometime this week.
I'm thankful for our listeners wherever you are.
Yes. Absolutely.
And you can find our show on the internet at www.theshortgame, where you'll find a contact form. That's a great way to let us know what you think about the show, suggest games, etc. You can also find us on Patreon at patreon.com/theshortgame. And most of the questions that you heard here were questions from our patrons submitted to us via our Discord. Thank you to all of our patrons. We're very thankful for you. I'm especially thankful for our patrons right now because if you heard last week's episode, you probably know that my microphone just completely went dead, and having the Patreon meant that didn't have to be a stressful thing or a big deal at all. I just ordered a new one and had it rushed to me in time for the next one. So, thank you very much to our listeners for their support. It keeps the show running. We really appreciate it. And of course, all of our listeners get access to our Discord, and we are thankful for having you there as well. So join us, patreon.com/theshortgame. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm Reagan K at RAYGANK. Laura, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Nate STL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And listeners, thank you for listening to The Short Game.